Unbelievable. Everyone said that has said that to me about, I'm not that technical person. I'm the brainstormer, the creator of this social communication anxiety treatment for this population, which is so play-based when they're young, exposure, behaviors, but as they get older, it's so CBT based
Right.
and it's so aware, but it's still fun and we still do it as something of interest for them. The predictable structure. Tell me how that plays into play, the having predictable structure for kids, especially with anxiety.
Yeah, it's so critical. I mean, you talked a little bit about the importance of kids feeling safe. I think this feeling of safety and this idea of structure and routine are intimately woven. And that is when kids feel safe, is when they know what's going to happen next. It's the same reason why it's critical for us to establish routines in our family, whether that's a bedtime routine or a routine around any kind of transition. It's the same reason why kids often ask for the same book to be read
Yeah.
over and over and over, or watch the same episode or the same cartoon, 1,000 times. It's because so much of a child's life, when you think about it, they have no control over. They're
You
told
said
when to
the
get in the
word,
car.
Jody. You
They're
said it. I'm sitting here biting at the bit
Yeah.
going, control, control. It's all about transferring control to these
That's right.
children.
That's right.
Structure, consistency, routine, and predictability. It's
Yeah.
so critical.
Yeah.
So that's why we call it a whole person approach. We're not
Yeah.
even talking about talking, but these kids
Yeah.
need that to fuel confidence, confident social communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And because so much of their life is out of their control, when you build in that routine, when you build in that this expectation and that structure, then the kids feel like they have some control because they know what comes next. It's the same reason again why they want that same story. They know what happens on the next page, and that feels really good for them because there's so much about their life that they don't know what's going to happen. And it feels wonderful when they know how that story ends.
And any adult, like you said, you can relate so much of this to any age. But as an adult, if you're an adult that has anxiety, struggles with anxiety, the more control you have and feel, the better you are. And when everything's in a disarray and you don't know what went and where, and everything makes you more anxious, less
Yes.
in control. So
Yes.
our children need the same, and they have very little control. They're told where to go, when to go, how to go. And without knowledge and readiness, it causes more fear and anxiety. So, why not give them that structure, consistency, routine, and predictability? So, one of the things that we do a lot of is creating that in their home environments. So, of the different, apps, toys, different modalities that you've created or are familiar with, do you have anything specific for that? Like helping kids know their schedule and creating it from a digital perspective? Anything special you can think of?
Well, we have in our Learn with Sesame app, we have some content that's specifically about getting ready for bed, and we have content that's specifically about trying new foods. And so we definitely have dabbled into the area of routines. We also have some parenting classes and resources that are associated and are built around this Learn with Sesame product, and it's available on our website. So we have some resources for families that are really all about routines and safety and structure. And as we mentioned in the digital app like Homer or even CodeSpark, when kids have the chance to choose what they want to play, that gives them that sense of control as well. The other thing that, as you were talking, Dr. E, that I think is so important and is related to this topic of play is that while we as humans do crave control and we want to know what's going to happen next, that's not always reality. And so, the other important benefit of play is that it allows kids and us as adults to develop tools, to have tools in our toolbox so that we can face things that are unfamiliar or that didn't quite go to plan. And that's again one of the benefits of play is allowing kids to kind of practice those reactions when things didn't quite work out, or as an adult to sort of see our child's reaction. So if a child is, let's take a very concrete example. If a child is trying to build a tower with blocks, and their tower falls down. That's not what they wanted. That is, not an experience that maybe they were expecting, and they might have a certain reaction. And as a grown up, that gives us a window and an opportunity to scaffold and to show them how they might react in that situation. Give them tools in their toolbox for reacting when things are a little bit unpredictable.
No, I love that. And I think that's great. And we talk about that. Like we will have them journal. So when they're trying to predict something like common questions, and just to give you an idea why we do things like that, the common questions that people can ask in various settings is because we're trying to give them a one up. Because when you know what, when, and where, it's about control. And we want it to be on the tip of the tongue. Like, what are they going to
Yeah.
ask you? It's summertime. Are they going to ask you where you're going over winter break? Or are they going to say to you, you're going to camp, you staying home? What are they going to ask you? What grade you're going to go into? What, something related to summer or a
Yeah.
holiday, or you're going to a restaurant. What are those common questions? It always is about minimizing their need to think and process for
Mhm.
their anxiety and give them that sense of control. But we also want them to think about what other questions we're asked in that situation. So we do something called, well, it's look, listen, and learn, which parents look, listen, and learn from their children, what causes them to take a longer time to warm up or feel
Mm.
comfortable, or how are they looking body wise language. But we teach this to the kids as they get a little bit older of watching the interaction in a grocery store, just standing in a grocery line. You can see the interaction between the cashier and another person because
Right.
very often in this population, because of the lack of speech, so many parents do for, speak for, siblings do for, speak for. Our
Mm.
kids tend to be the passenger in the car.
Right.
So I teach parents and I help children become more of the driver through choices that they have, that they make. And you're right, through play and making those different choices through play and seeing how something didn't work out. And I love your example about the blocks not working out. That's something so
Mhm.
simple. But
Yeah.
another aspect we see a lot of challenges with is turn taking and sharing.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
It's other than that, it is hard. It's very hard. We as humans are, we're a little egocentric, right? We want things to go our way. That is natural. That is normal. And sharing is something that has to be practiced. And the wonderful thing about play and
Yeah.
games, and it sounds like you have so many games like built into everything that you do, that is just the most natural way, in my opinion, to practice sharing and turn taking. It's just an inherent part of games, but it's also, of course, an inherent part of conversation, learning how to listen and then you take your turn and that sort of serve and return, similar to tennis, right? Like that is just an important, just such a critical part of communication that practicing that through play, practicing that through games makes so much sense.
You're going to love this one game that kids play, and it's exactly that. The interview process is like a global term for give, take, back, forth. Because again, you'd think once a child is like with someone, they know how to have give, take, even non-verbally, but many of my kids don't.
Right.
So using those areas of interest, you could talk about Sesame Street and all the characters perhaps, but
Yeah.
it could be any of the other characters that are big or an interest they have. Having these kind of guess who games we create where they put the characters in a bag or they create like visuals, like I had a little boy loving the different planets. And so people guess the planet
Yeah.
and they guess it wrong. And then they have to correct them, whatever stage they're working on, I guess you
Sure.
could say, or how
Yeah.
the parents help facilitate. But it's amazing just through being a big shot, like you mentioned early on, that confidence will be enough to fuel progression into verbal. And
Yeah.
so having that back and forth give take, and we have the pointer game where they're teaching by just pointing. I mean, we have a lot of kids that really, Jody, struggle with social engagement and
Yeah.
nonverbal communication.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's just such a beautiful example and a beautiful space to practice that. And one of the things that really helps kids open up in a lot of ways is like unstructured free play. Because that's really all about storytelling and building out a narrative, even if it's not out loud, even if it's entirely in a child's head, but giving kids an opportunity to be bored which sounds crazy, but There, by some estimates, kids have about 11 hours a week less of free play and unstructured play now than they did a couple decades ago. And we could talk about all the reasons why there's so much less time now for free unstructured play. But allowing kids to be bored and try to figure out how to play with some toys on their own in a way that doesn't have a goal, that doesn't have an end. It's really about them figuring out what to do with these toys. That often facilitates this storytelling and this narrative building in young kids, which can, have spillover positive effects in terms of communication.
So when you're playing some of these games, when these children are playing games, what does the research show about, I understand free play, the old fashioned throwing a ball across, things like that to each other and running and having hide and seek. Now we're using more these digital toys. We're using
Yeah.
these apps. And what is the research showing with some of the different toys, and how does it work with the development of that, with how the brain works and how it might
Yeah.
be, like, what's your thought on that? Because I'm sure you think about that and that's a big topic sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. And now AI is in the world and that's changing
Yeah.
everything and research can't keep up. But at its most simplistic form, if I think about play in terms of unstructured free play versus guided play, those two very large buckets, we'll start with guided play. So, guided play is really when a child is driving a situation, but that situation has been very intentionally designed or is an intentionally sort of um, guided by an adult. And you can actually think about a lot of educational toys and digital interactive content that's designed for learning outcomes as guided play because the kid wants to play. The child is very engaged and having fun, and maybe it's with their favorite characters. But the actual play has been designed by adults to facilitate a learning outcome, whether that is to recognize the shapes of letters or to start to match letter sounds to letter shapes or to count objects or whatever those learning outcomes are. Those experiences, while playful, have been guided by an adult. And so I sort of think about a lot of products that are on the market today that are educational as really supporting a guided play. And there's a lot of research that talks about the importance of guided play. I think it's a bit of a stretch to think about all educational products as supporting guided play, and there's a lot of nuance there, and not all of them are great, believe me. But I sort of think about that in that sort of big bucket. And then let's talk about unstructured and free play. So, this kind of play, again, this is where the child is initiating the experience and directing the experience. The adult has very little to do in this situation. This is where the child is looking at those blocks that have been laying on the floor for a week and walks over to them and decides to start playing. That is free play. And maybe they are thinking in their minds about this village that they want to design or the roads that they want to build with the blocks for their cars, or maybe they want to build the tallest tower they can possibly build. They are entirely creating that experience. And so that's unstructured free play. And the research shows that that kind of play is incredibly important for self-expression, for problem solving, and for storytelling and narrative. So both kinds of play are very important and they support different kinds of learning outcomes.